Shalom, Israel. This is Bishop Nathaniel. The Israelites have been scattered across the four corners of the earth, as prophesied in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. Here in Israel United in Christ, we need your help to recover the remnant of our people, teach them the gospel. Please help us, support us, and join or donate to the Booster Club today. Shalom.
Officer Amber Guyger. Have you saw that?
We're learning new details about the night a former Dallas police officer shot and killed her neighbor in his home as her murder trial continues. Amber Guyger.
At the start of Amber Guyger's trial, good morning. Prosecutors say that at the time of the shooting, Amber Guyger was preoccupied. Was seen in video.
I can speak for myself. I forgive you.
That's been circulating quite a bit, reportedly showing her in the moments after she shot Jean inside his house.
We, the jury, unanimously find the defendant, Amber Guyger, guilty of murder as charged in the indictment.
I don't even want you to go to jail.
A key witness in the trial of a former Dallas police officer convicted of murdering her neighbor is now himself the victim of a homicide.
It's Joshua Brown, a key witness whose testimony may have helped convict former Dallas officer Amber Guyger.
Yesterday, Amber Guyger was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the murder of former Jean. But it was what Jean's brother did after the sentencing that brought the court to a standstill.
Can I give her a hug, please?
18-year-old Brant Jean forgave Amber Guyger, who'd just been sentenced to 10 years in prison for killing his older brother Botham. At the end of the hearing, Judge Tammy Kemp gave a Bible to Guyger and embraced her as well.
But I love you just like anyone else.
Shalom, y'all. Most High in Christ bless. Obviously, y'all fame. I'm here with Brother Milton. We in Hampton, VA at the Hampton University Homecoming 2019. So let's get right to it, bro. So do you feel as though the judge, the bailiff, and the brother of the victim, both of them, John, do you feel as though that the judge and the bailiff sympathizing for the killer, do you think that was right or wrong? What's your opinions on that?
So I'll start with the judge. One, I think it was wrong because as a judge, she should be impartial. So she did a few things. One, she gave the woman a Bible, which, it could have been a Quran, it could have been a Torah, it could have, been any religious script. But so that showed you her bias. But moreover, she asked the jury to consider the castle law in Texas. To me, that was the biggest part of the case that people weren't talking about, which is synonymous to stand your ground. And, so the fact that she wanted the jury to consider that, I thought that was very unfair. Not too familiar with the whole story behind the bailiff, I'll be honest with you. But I think, in terms of like the gravity of the sentence, very unfair, man. You had a guy in Texas that got 43 years to steal in a pack of bacon from a Save-A-Lot. And this woman killed an innocent man who was just sitting in his house. So I don't think it was fair, and I hope that judge is recommended to be removed and ultimately disbarred because she has not shown proper prudence and almost a dereliction of duty as a judge, but moreover as an officer of the court. She should be removed. Yeah.
Okay. Very strong opinion.
I'm Officer Benjamin, IUIC DC. We out here in Hampton, Virginia. And I have here with me
Marie
and
Kia.
Okay, the topic today is Amber Guyger. Have y'all heard of the case?
Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately.
Okay. So a few questions I want to ask. I'm gonna start with you. With what went on during her court case when she had the judge, the lawyer, and her brother, they all sympathized for the killer. Do you find that okay?
I'm okay with the sympathizing, but I'm not necessarily with showing that type of sympathy in the courtroom the way it was done. I'm not okay with that.
Okay, and how about you?
Agreed. The sympathy is godly, but I don't think the reaction was appropriate. But then we weren't there, so we don't know how we would have handled it.
You said it was godly. Well, what do you mean by that when you said it's godly?
Because even when God punishes us, he feels for us, but the punishment still remains. and we have to serve. But I think it breaks his heart, and I think that's what happened in the courtroom.
Do you feel like it's okay for the judge, the officer, and the way they sympathize for the killer? Do you feel like that's okay?
Nah, I don't think that was professional of the judge to show any type of sympathy towards her. I don't think it's professional.
Okay, so you disagree with that, right? What about how when the police officer was stroking her hair and things of that nature?
I don't think any of that should have been going on. I mean, to me, if the officer was black or if she wasn't an officer, none of that would have been going on.
Well, as far as the judge is concerned, the judge should be neutral. It is the judge's duty to listen to all of the evidence and then make a ruling based on the laws of that particular state. And that's what the judge's job is, not to feel sympathy, not to put her own feelings into any type of case at all.
So, Brother Russell, let's get right into it. The Amber Guyger case, Botham Jean, all right? Do you feel as though it was okay for the judge, the bailiff, and the victim's brother to sympathize with Amber Guyger as she sat in the courtroom being sentenced?
No, I don't. I think it's ridiculous that a police officer with all that advanced training can walk into someone else's home and not realize it's not their home and then shoot an innocent man and kill him. That's ridiculous, and I don't believe that's right at all.
My name is Laura.
Okay, we're here with Laura. So we're going to ask you a few questions on the Amber Guyger case, okay? So the first question is, as you saw in the case, we saw that the judge had a lot of sympathy for the killer, and we want to get your opinion. How you feel about that?
I think that sympathy is a natural human emotion, and I'm not sure if it's possible to regulate that.
I understand. Do you feel as though a lot of the sympathy that we see for that person, do you think it was justified? Do you feel that it was properly placed to have sympathy on the person who committed such a crime?
It's hard to say because when you think about the sympathy that you want to apply to that situation, you predominantly want it to go towards the victim and his family and the loved ones in his lives. But I understand sympathizing for the fact that the rest of her life is going to be dramatically changed for a decision that she made in a split second as well.
I think there's a few large issues happening in this case, and the main one of focus that I think it's important to highlight is the representation in the country of racial disparities in injustice. And then secondly, I think there's a different approach that comes with family and friends and being sympathetic to a human being and seeing that person as more than a killer. And I think that there's a couple different levels happening at play at that. In my personal opinion, I think it would be really hard for me to be in a position where I have my brother, for example, on trial for murdering someone and never having seen my brother as a murderer. But at the same time, like reflecting on the country as a whole and reflecting on where we're at in terms of racial injustices makes it less easy for me personally to sympathize with where they're coming from.
So you're saying the answer is pretty much no, it's not that easy to sympathize?
Yes.
Okay. Brother Randy, I'll start with you first. Do you feel that it was okay for the judge and the bailiff to sympathize with Amber Guyger as she was being sentenced?
I think sympathy is universal, and I think at that moment and at that time, they felt they were doing something that was a human nature, and so it was natural. And so for that, I think they were following what they felt they wanted to do in their heart. Okay,
Sis Trina, same question for you.
Well, I agree that I felt that they were probably doing what they felt natural to do, but I don't know if they should have done it in front of the cameras, maybe done it, pulled her to the side and, gave whatever support that they wanted to.
Do you feel that for the judge, the officer, and the brother to all sympathize for the killer? Do you feel that that's correct, that's accurate, they should do that?
kind of yes and no. On the simple fact that at the end of the day, we all human race. You know what I'm saying? Like, and the fact that somebody can wrong me and still I can still show compassion to that person. I feel like that's a greater goal. Like, I feel like her punishment should have been longer than what it was, but still to be able to empathize for the next person. You know what I'm saying? The best way to kill somebody is kill them with kindness, man.
I have mixed emotions about that. I understand the sympathetic side that the young male, the brother, maybe that's part of his healing process. I felt as though the judge, too, was trying to reach out, and that the young lady, I've heard of later, a few days later, that the young lady had asked for a Bible. So she felt the need to give her Bible. But in the same token, the other side, where I said I have mixed feelings, is that I think there's a time and a place for everything. And I think we should be able to have a time to grieve and or just be angry and or disappointed. So I think both of their reactions were very early compared to what a lot of people probably would have felt. That point of forgiveness or that point of empathy for this person who murdered somebody. So it's mixed emotions on my part.
Okay, and what do you think about that, Tom?
Well, I really didn't have, say, for instance, like mixed emotions. I think that because of whatever her current position was at that particular time, I don't think she should have been shown any special privileges because of her status as a police officer. I think her time was not long enough for the crime that she committed. I think that they were just too lenient. You know, and it's just part of, society pick and choose, or I should say the law pick and choose who's gonna spend more time than those that spend less time. And I think her time for what she did was not long enough. She should have more time served. And it's really sad that when you see a judge step in and provide a personal service to somebody that committed such a crime, and I can only say that because of personal circumstances with me, is to see the judge make a stance like that and say, "Oh, let's embrace you." No, you murdered somebody, and I'm not saying that she shouldn't feel any love, but you're in a court, and there's a level of professionalism that should take place in that courtroom, and you don't embrace any other criminal, so why would you put this special attention to this person to embrace them and say, "Oh, we're so no." She should have served more time.
I feel like them being humans and in the mindset of forgiveness, yes, it was okay for them to empathize.
There was a key witness in the trial. His name was Joshua Brown. He also was murdered. Do you think that was a coincidence? Yes or no?
I vacillate, and this is why, right? So there's a backstory that I don't think a lot of people were focusing on, because it literally seemed like, oh my God, like the cops came after this guy. There's a backstory. He had some, he had shady dealings. But I think that there's an element, and or at least I want to believe there's an element that the cops exposed this guy. Like his exposure was heightened by him just by no circumstances of his own. He just happened to be in the wrong place at the right time. But I think it was very unfortunate that he was killed. The coincidence, and it's very coincidental, that he was murdered, within days. And they attribute it to he was selling drugs, just like they tried to run down the brother that was murdered. They're like, "Oh, we found weed in his house." So they'll do these things to run your character down, but without addressing the situation. So coming full circle, I do think like the cops had a hand in that. I just think it's a bit, again, coincidental that this guy had been living under the radar, whether he was selling weed, coke, whatever he was selling. And then a few days later, he was murdered. So one, it tells me that the cops knew who he was and, what his activities were. And then they exposed this guy. And I don't think that was fair.
Right after one of the key witnesses testified, he was murdered. Do you find that a coincidence?
Yeah, without knowing all the facts, though, I mean, I've seen some stuff on the news, but I found it a coincidence. Like, really? He was murdered shortly after testifying? I don't know. That seemed a little fishy to me. Yeah, absolutely.
How about you?
I think there's some evidence that shows that he had been threatened prior to. So definitely not a coincidence. I think it was to send a message that you were part of the team that put Amber behind bars, and anybody else that wants to snitch, we're going to handle you.
After the witness testified, the witness name was Joshua Brown. After the witness testified, he was found dead. He was shot in the mouth. Do you feel as though that was a coincidence?
Not to me. I'm pretty sure somebody had something to do with that.
So there was a key witness in the murder trial. His name was Joshua Brown. He unfortunately was murdered after he testified. Do you think do you think his murder was a coincidence? Yes or no?
I don't know because I don't know all the aspects of that situation, but I would not be surprised if that was not something more than a coincidence.
I don't think it was. Don't think it was a coincidence. Different things happen for different reasons, and it's too close for him to have been killed that close to the actual trial.
Okay.
Not at all. I feel like we came together as a community. He did his part. The brother did his part to make sure that justice was served, or try to make sure justice was served correctly. But at the end of the day, the other kind, they ain't like to see that happen, so they eliminated the problem.
Oh, so the key witness was Joshua Brown in the murder trial. He was unfortunately murdered himself. Do you think that was a coincidence? Yes or no?
I don't think anything was a coincidence. I think that because of his appearance and him testifying on behalf of the defense, I think that his presence was amplified, and as a result of that, I think he was put out there. So
It wasn't a coincidence.
Right after the sentencing, a key witness named Joshua Brown, he was murdered a few days later. Do you find that a coincidence at all?
Unfortunately, I think that these things happen in our country without necessarily going into the depth of investigation that we should be investing in regularly, and oftentimes it's kind of brushed aside as coincidence or happenstance. So personally, I am not sure, but I would not be surprised at all if it wasn't a coincidence.
After the trial, there was a murder of one of the key witnesses. Do you think that was a coincidence that happened around that time?
I'm not even aware of that. I wasn't even aware of that. I think right after the trial, so much focus was given on the young brother and the judge. I wasn't even aware of that. So there may be more to it. And I want to add also from my own viewpoint, if what I heard was correct, that this person that committed this murder went outside that young man's apartment and stood out there talking to other police officers trying to figure out how to clear up this whole situation. And they said that was critical time, that had she called 911, that young man may have survived. So again, it's very hard to have empathy for somebody like that. And there may be more corruption from the top if something like that occurred.
And a few days later, after the case, Joshua Brown was shot dead. Do you feel as though that was a coincidence?
Absolutely not.
Do you think that was a coincidence?
No, it happened. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it was a setup.
We as a people, namely African Americans, we've gone through a lot the past 400 years and counting. We've seen many black people, black men and black women, rise to positions of power. So do you think that our people who are in positions of power can do anything to stop the injustice that is against or put against our people?
I think that we can. I think that it would be a huge task. I think that we have to have a certain number of people to come together for that benefit. And until that happens, nothing's going to change.
As far as the black people in power, our leaders, if it was more black leaders in the community, do you think that will help with the injustice that's happening to our people?
I fight for justice every day. I'm a practicing attorney. And I see it in the courts every day. We don't have enough African Americans as judges. We do have an African American prosecutor in Hampton, and we do have some African American prosecutors and their Commonwealth attorneys. And, they do what they can do, but really we need more elected officials and more judges.
But I also think we have to have woke blacks in power and those who are enlightened, because some of us don't even understand how the system impacts us, and we participate in that. So we need to evaluate ourselves often. So we may have the position, but we need to act accordingly.
Well, we do have a lot of people that are in seats of power, but the people that put them in those seats of power, we need to make sure that they do what they should do. So if they're not doing what we feel is the right thing, then we need to start putting pressure on them so they can make change.
Blacks in power. Do you think that could resolve the injustice system?
It could resolve it, but the greater thing that comes with us being in power is you also have to train other people how to appropriately use that power and how to come together as a community. We could be at the top, but if no one is teaching the next person how to maintain that power, then it's pointless.
My thoughts are it needs to be just clear, with the if there's corruption, it just needs to be clear guidelines that's outlined no matter what your color is, I should say. And to not, penalize, and I think it would just create maybe a little bit more harmony. If you have a person that murders, say for instance a black person that murders someone white, they get a stiffer penalty. You have somebody that's white that murders someone that's black, it's almost like a slap on the hand, or if they serve time at all. I think it should be fair across the board, no matter what your color is. It should have no bearing on what your sentencing time is. Equal, when they say equal rights, equal justice, it should just be equal. We pay our way into society just like everybody else, and it should never be a color barrier. And I think the justice system should just take account and be more accountable for what they do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need more of us in power, doing things the right way, seeing to it that it's done the right way.
We have a lot of our people who are in seats of power. So do you think that our people, black people who are in seats of power, do you think that there's anything that they can do to stop the injustices committed against our people?
Absolutely. Well, let me phrase that. I think there are things that can be done. I don't look for seats of power to make those decisions. Even when you look at like the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, that these are people who are a minority in terms of their numbers, in terms of the representation. And so in terms of like the votes that they can give in terms of passing laws, legislation, but I think it's more at a micro level what we can do. And I think that we as a people, we have to be a bit more pernicious in how we spend our money, where we spend our money, who we spend our money with. And I think once you make it an economic argument, then everyone wants to listen. At the point when you start, screwing up people's money, now you have their ears. And I think as black people, we have the highest in terms of our buying power. The amount of money we spend is astronomical. And I think once we react from that perspective, then you'll start to get results. You saw that in the '60s with the Montgomery bus boycott. They didn't let black women catch the bus because they felt bad. They were walking in the rain. They bankrupted the whole industry. So there are no mechanics, there are no drivers, there are no station workers. So when you hit these folks in their pockets, then they'll come around. Okay. And that's what needs to happen.
Okay. Interesting answer.
She was sentenced to 10 years. Do you think that's fair?
No, absolutely not.
Why not?
It's not enough time for murder. For murdering a man in his own home, and then just the evidence, it was sketchy. It was not an accident. She knew that she was walking into an apartment that was not hers. I don't care what anyone says. So no, 10 years was not enough time for murder. If it was reversed, and you know what I mean by that, skin color, no way. 10 years is enough time.
Okay, but you said that you was. I'm a little confused because you said that you was sympathized. You understand why they was sympathized, but then you said it's not an accident.
Came from the brother. You asked me right? The sympathy, the instant forgiveness from him, and the sympathy from the judge. I'm okay with their feeling sympathy, but the sentencing has nothing to do with their sympathy. No, the sympathy is the sympathy is personal. The law and the sentencing should have been different. I don't think 10 years was enough time.
Of course not. They said 10 years, and she only got to do 5 before she can be, or she can appeal to try to get released. And I definitely know that would not be the case if she was black. So no.
The trial, the sentences was 10 years. Do you think that was a fair judgment?
I think it was a little short, especially since I heard there was a gentleman that got 99 years for kicking a police officer. Now, granted, he did have some additional charges. This wasn't his first charge, but he kicked a police officer, and he got 99 years. And we have a gentleman that's dead, and we have a 10-year sentence. One was black, one was white, one was a former police officer, one was had a criminal record. You be the judge.
Do you think 10 years is a fair sentence for cold-blooded murder?
No, I don't. I don't. There's a big thing about sentencing people of color and white people, and it's not even a question that people of color get sentenced to harsher sentences than white people. Look at the white kid that got drunk and killed people and did not set a 1 foot in jail until after he didn't do what his I don't know what you would say. He had certain things that he had to adhere to in order to stay out of jail, and he violated that, and that's when he went to jail. However, and again, like the white man that raped a woman from Stanford, who spent 30 days in jail, 90 days in jail. That's ridiculous. So there is no consistency in sentencing, and that is totally 100% wrong.
I certainly don't think she received enough of a punishment for the crime. And the simple fact that it's 10 years, a police officer, if she does well, she may be out probably in 3 to 5 years. So in the long run, 10 may not even be served. But at a bare minimum, this young man's life is gone. And this was a very productive, well-liked, well-loved individual who is gone because of her actions that could have been possibly saved had she not went out the apartment and tried to figure out how to scheme and get herself out of that situation by making phone calls instead of calling 911 to try to save that young man. So when I think of all of that, I say absolutely not. It was not fair sentencing at all. She should have been put away for a much longer period of time.
No, not at all. I think with the injustices that have been done, and if you look at parallel cases, that received much harsher sentences. So no.
So I'm a prison abolitionist. So it's hard for me to advocate for anyone being locked up. That being said, she ended a man's life. It's hard to justify her getting 10 years when someone who didn't look like her would get a substantial more amount of time. I don't have a strong yes or no answer on that.
Amber Guyger was given 10 years for murder. Is that a fair judgment, yay or nay?
I don't think it is. I don't think it was a fair judgment. I'm actually surprised that, the judge, the jury issued a sentence, but the judge had the ability to overrule that sentence. And the mere fact that she did not step in, it was bothersome for a number of factors, right? I don't even want to introduce race, just from a judicial perspective. It was a bit telling. And I wish, and I know this is a bit off topic. So in South Africa, you can appeal a sentence. So I don't know if you remember Oscar Pistorius, the guy who killed his wife. So the prosecutor appealed the decision of the judge. They went to a higher court, and that's how this guy got more time in prison. I wish that same system was in America. There's no reason why a woman or any person can kill someone without cause and go to prison for 10 years, but a woman who's sending her child to school in Connecticut gets 5 years in prison. A woman in Dallas, Texas she got 3 years in prison for illegally voting. But this woman killed a man, and she got 10 years. That's not cool, man.
I can't be the judge of that, but like either way, 10 years or more time, she's going to have to live with it for the rest of her life. It's going to be there. It's going to be on her mind for the rest of her life.
What do you think, according to the Bible, what do you think it means to love thy enemy?
Love thy enemy. Perfect example. David and Saul. In David's eyes, he wasn't going to touch the anointed man who God presented to be his vessel at that time. But Saul, he wanted David's head. And David still showed that love. So, like, you know what I'm saying? It's important to love the person that's trying to take you out, because at the end of the day, that person, if you kill somebody that's trying to take you out, you're not displaying the true love that dwells on the inside of you. So you got to try your hardest to, no matter what, if you can, survive, and also be that representation of love that you want to see.
Okay, I like that answer, that example that you gave.
Love thy enemy. What does that actually mean according to the Bible?
Well, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, you should love them because they are a human, they're a person, and respect their rights that they have. But as far as them impeding on other people's rights, then we draw the line there.
I would say in the best case scenario, then you should not have animosity towards your enemy. You should want the best for them, but that's a concept that you have to have in your best case scenario. I can't say that I'm perfect and I can't maybe not do that, but I think in the best case scenario, that's what you should do.
Love your enemy. What do you think the Bible means when it says to love your enemy?
I personally am not very religious, so I am coming from a standpoint of trying to understand the words from the Bible. But I don't know. I think, again, there's like two different approaches. There's a media representational approach of trying to empathize with or sympathize with someone who, for whatever reason, we need to sympathize with when they've committed a wrongdoing. However, I think it is important to, when thinking about the biblical reference of loving an enemy, it's more, I think it's harder to sympathize with loving an enemy who's committed such a harsh injustice as murder, than someone who maybe has done you wrong in the past in lesser circumstances. So,
to me, it means that oftentimes people come from very ignorant places and ignorant perspectives. And so I'm going to love you whether I see the world that you see it, whether we come from the same socioeconomics, the same race, the same religion. I'm going to love you because there's always an element of ignorance. And I can't fault you for that. So you can be my enemy, just like you see this today in the field of battle. You have American soldiers who are fighting wars all around the world. They're fighting a rich man's war. But at the end of the day, dog, I just want to get home to see my kids like you want to see your kids. I want to see my wife like you want to see your wife. So to that end, I can love my enemy. But it's a fine line. It's a very fine line. But you can absolutely love your enemy, man. I mean, because there's more commonality than there is things that separate you.
I believe the Bible means when it says love thy enemy, is that even though, say, for instance, evil and wrong is done to us, you can love your enemy, but in the same, and embrace them, but in the same time, you have to put stuff in its perspective. So if you're referencing it sort of in the court case, if you wanted to hug her, you go hug her outside of that court room, and then in a sense she wasn't the person's enemy or whatever. But I'll give you an example. If somebody does me wrong, I'm able to approach that person because communication in our times is kind of lax. Everybody's so hostile and, angry and just mad, and just to embrace that person, and because we don't culturally know who that person is. And so when you open yourself up and say, oh, you done me wrong, then and this is what I like and this is what I don't like, and just maybe the person will stand you. I've had that before, to say, well, we don't know each other, but I'm going to embrace you and love you and care enough about you to come to you and say something to you, so I won't be that hostile. We don't know what that situation was in that apartment. We know that them two people had to have encountered each other at the same time, and something happened, and we're not taught to really, and I shouldn't say taught to love, but love unconditionally without wanting to harm and hurt other people. So when the Bible says love your enemies, you have to love that enemy to be able to survive, because you'd be so bitter and so angry.
Okay, and you mentioned about forgiveness. So what do you think the Bible means when it says to love and forgive thy enemy?
Absolutely what just happened with regard to that case. She may be the enemy in the case that, the gentleman was killed in his apartment. However, like with that, the judge and the brother are in the mindset of forgiveness and how they operated in speaking with her and, showing her love.
I think it means to understand that we're all human, and to empathize, and to understand that at the end of the day, that humans are humans, and forgiveness is necessary in a lot of cases.
If you could get me Habakkuk 1:4, because you said that if tables was turned, that it would have been a harsher punishment, right? What you said was biblical, and we're going to prove it throughout with the scriptures. Habakkuk 1:4.
This is the book of Habakkuk, chapter 1, verse 4. Therefore, the law is slacked, and judgment doth never go forth, for the wicked doeth compass about the righteous. Therefore, wrong judgment proceedeth.
So you are correct. What you said was out the Bible. Did you know that?
To a certain extent, I ain't know where it was at, but for the most part, I'm an avid reader, so I understand the concept.
Okay, and also I like the example that you gave with Saul and David. Because the Bible says for us to love our enemies. But we got to find out, can we get that scripture in Matthew where it says to love thy enemies? We're going to get it out, and then we're going to get what enemies they mean that they're talking about. I think it's Matthew 5:43.
43. The book of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 43. Ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemies. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you.
So now we would think that we got to love our enemies, right? As so-called the whites or the Asians, Chinese, we're supposed to love them, right? You would think that. In the same book, let me get 10 and 34. This is out the same book now.
The book of Matthew, chapter 10, verse 34. Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword.
Do you know who they're talking about?
Yeah. Oh,
who you think that person's coming? Think not I have not to come. Read that again.
Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword.
Do you know who that person is?
That's Jesus speaking.
All right, now let's keep going.
Verse 35. For I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law.
Keep going.
And a man's foes shall be they of his own household.
So when he says to love your enemies, he's talking about your kin. You see what I mean? So what you said, that example was correct. Now, let me get Proverbs 6 and 16. Start at 16. Because when we talk about sympathy, how you think the Most High God would sympathize with that?
I'm not sure.
Let's get it out the Bible.
The book of Proverbs, chapter 6, verse 16. These 6 things doeth the Lord hate. Yea, 7 are an abomination unto him.
So we're talking about things that the Lord hates. Read on.
Verse 17. A proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood.
Was not that man sitting on his couch with ice cream in his hand, and he did no harm, right? Keep going. No, finish that out.
A proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, and heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and him that soweth discord among brethren.
So not only that, the media portrayed it as forgive your enemies. Then they try to paint the picture on him, said they found weed in his house. They try to say, she thought it was her house. Right, exactly. Last scripture. Let me get Habakkuk 1:4, because the question was, do you think that 10 years was fair? Let's see what the Bible has to say about that. Habakkuk 1:4.
The book of Habakkuk, chapter 1, verse 4. Therefore the law is slacked, and judgment doth never go forth. For the wicked doeth compass about the righteous. Therefore wrong judgment proceedeth.
You got anything to say?
Still can't judge them. Like I don't feel like I'm in a position to judge anybody. How I operate, like for my heart to be at ease, is always be forgiving, no matter like how wrong a person is towards me. So I feel like those individuals operated in that capacity to forgive, because that's what worked for them. So.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for your time, Nikki. And with that, we say shalom.
Now they will see the true men of God. We are not black men, we are the Israelites. That's right. Take care of us. And the children too. We have abandoned. How are you? People want to know, who's the king?
Oh, nation of Israel, it's time to return to the Father. Oh, nation of Israel, it's time to return to the Father.
Now why they trying to make it so hard to serve God? And why when I say that I'm a Jew it sound odd? For years I've been walking around saying that I'm a black man. I ain't saying that no more, it sounds wrong, man.
This is Bishop Nathaniel of Israel United in Christ. Please subscribe to our YouTube channels. Stay up to date with our latest events, music, and classroom lessons. IUIC plans to continue visiting different countries where this gospel has not been preached before. IUIC needs your help in pushing this truth. So join us. Subscribe to our Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and podcasts, and stay up to date with us. For more information, please visit www.israelunite.org.